This week in the business of tech, warnings about productivity paranoia amidst productivity theater, multiple new data points on IT services and their importance, women, why are we tolerating this, asks Reddit group, girls who code book ban resurfaces, and the Q3 diversity report. All these stories and more. Hit those like, subscribe, and the notification button and help us pay the bills. And here are this week's stories. As we're coming to the end of September, the heralded return to work from Labor Day is being re-examined. New data from Castle Systems on office occupancy now, up 4% from the week before Labor Day, with 10 of the country's top metropolitan areas seeing an average of 47.5% of workers swiping into offices, compared with pre-pandemic levels. Microsoft released a research study on the workplace, pointing to the perils of not resolving the hybrid work perception gap. 87% of surveyed workers say they are productive at work. 12% of leaders say they're fully confident their employees are productive. The company is calling the gap productivity paranoia. The surveys found that a lack of trust in employee productivity is more common among managers whose teams continue to work away from the traditional office at least part of the time. Data gleaned from the usage of Microsoft software and online services indicates a sustained increase in overall activity by workers. The company said that the number of weekly meetings was up 153% versus the start of the pandemic for the average Microsoft Teams user as of this spring, and the trend shows no sign of abating. About 42% of meeting attendees are multitasking by sending email and other messages. It doesn't include other forms of multitasking, such as reading email or browsing the web. And that's the productivity theater portion of the report. In addition to their regular working hours, office workers said they spend an average of 67 extra minutes online each day, or 5.5 hours a week, simply making sure they're visibly working online, according to a recent survey from software companies Catalog and GitLab. And some of that is leading to paranoia. Over in the Wall Street Journal, a Gartner VP details how the number of employers who have used some kind of worker surveillance doubled since the pandemic. He says that 2/3 of medium to large companies now do this, up from 1/3. And time is being proven to be disconnected from productivity. We have updates to that UK experiment in 4-day work weeks. Among 41 companies participating in the trial, which began about 3 months ago, 35 said they would probably keep the new schedule even after the experiment officially ends in November. Only 2 said productivity had dropped, while 6 said it had actually improved, maybe because of heightened employee morale. Why do we care? Headlines were saying that the return to work is working. Is it? When less than half of workers are coming in, it doesn't seem like it's working to me. If you think I'm covering this a lot, you're right. This is one of the dominant trends in work, and it's entirely technology-enabled. A reminder, a backlash against the tech can sweep up the provider who provides it. Ultimately, an IT services firm wants its customers to be successful with the technology. That's why we care so very much about this. Because beyond that, there's this entire wild west of consulting and advising in a highly complex world. There's no single answer here, which is excellent news for those who like to sell complex services. The critical insight continues to be, train better managers who know how to handle remote workers. I wanted to break out one employee benefit, leave. I didn't cover it, but the averted railway workers' strike included a fight over paid sick leave. Axios covered it, as well as the tensions with nurses and mental health care workers over the same. Insider has an entire piece covering how unlimited time off is basically a sham. And while we're on it, a new Axios Generation Lab poll shows 82% of Gen Zers say the idea of doing the minimum required to keep their jobs is pretty or extremely appealing, and some 15% of that share are already doing it. Why do we care? I broke this out because it's a particular perk, which reads very well in the headline and is awful in implementation. companies are finding that employees are putting up with a lot less. Break down the why. The pandemic was both a break from the norms and a collective trauma. Individuals are reevaluating what is essential to them, similar to those who experience medical issues like a heart attack and survive. They become less tolerant in areas where it impacts their priorities, many of which are personal, including family and home life. Savvy leaders are putting their people into larger context and recognizing this is a marathon, not a sprint. Burning them out is rarely an intelligent choice. If you're worried about your relevance, CompTIA data says not to be. 62% of respondents in CompTIA's latest research, S&B technology buying trends, say the use of technology today is a primary factor in their reaching their strategic business goals. 31% deem tech a secondary factor in those critical efforts, with only 5% calling it a non-factor. Let's quote the report. In general, these more aggressive business goals seem to map with the more positive attitudes about the current state of their business. 3 in 10 SMBs agreed that their company was thriving thus far in 2022 by increasing revenue and profitability. That compares with 22% that said so last year. Most firms describe their health as holding steady in revenue and profit levels, similar to last year, 51% in 2022 and 48% in 2021. The number that reports struggling this year, a net 19%, is down from 29% that said so in 2021. Other areas of growth, this one from Synergy Research Group. Pending on-cloud-based and on-prem collaboration technologies grew to nearly $15 billion in Q2 2022, an 8% quarterly bump compared to last year, quoting CIO Dive. Companies decreased the proportion of collaboration investment in on-prem, doubling down on cloud-based as-a-service technologies. On-prem spending accounted for just 20% of the $15 billion. At the same time, nearly half went to a small group of high-growth, in-demand services, including service-based unified communication, contact center, and communications platform technology. The article further positions this as good for Microsoft and bad for Zoom due to the former's positioning broadly to deliver all the services around work. Why do we care? That list of technologies is the critical insight. Where are the high-growth, in-demand services? Around supporting collaboration and work. If you want to be as relevant as possible to your customers, who seem optimistic, then you'll be focusing here. So, some new legislation to be aware of. The top Democrat and Republican on the Senate Homeland Security Committee have introduced new legislation to protect open source software from cyber attacks while evaluating how federal government agencies use open source code. The Securing Open Source Software Act would provide a series of new directives for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency to hire open source experts and develop a framework to assess open source code risks within 1 year. That story from NextGov. Of note, that bill is in reaction to Log4j. And signed in California, AB 587 requires social media companies making more than $100 million in annual revenue to publish their terms of service and submit semi-annual reports to the state attorney general detailing how they enforce those terms. Each violation can cost them up to $15,000. Also from California, the California Age-Appropriate Design Code Act. The act requires all California companies providing online services that children might access to default to the highest level of privacy settings, conduct privacy impact assessments, and report them to the Attorney General. It also prevents those businesses from using children's personal information indiscriminately. These two stories from Protocol. Why do we care? Most listeners shouldn't spend their time worrying about bills like AB 587 and instead focus on two areas to keep track of with their customers. These are examples of that. First, ensure you're tracking security-related changes based on the velocity they're coming out of the government. Second, follow data and privacy because states are stepping in with the Fed moving at its current glacial pace, which will continue to make it a complex area. Of course, complexity can mean opportunity too. According to Gartner data released Monday, the top 3 priorities for mid-size enterprises in 2022 are security and risk management, application and integration strategies, and infrastructure, operations, and cloud strategies. Businesses in Gartner's mid-size enterprise category have an average IT budget of $6.7 million, with average total company revenue of $345 million. According to the report, Gartner found that security controls, tools, and processes were part of virtually every technology discussion and dominate active IT projects, which surveyed 134 mid-size enterprises CIOs and IT leaders. 2/3 of respondents are dedicating the largest amount of new or additional funding to cybersecurity. Business intelligence and data analytics and cloud platforms round out the top 3. According to the report, despite investments in cloud platforms, including software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service, over half of mid-size enterprise infrastructure will continue to be non-cloud based through 2025. This from CIO Dive. Couple that with data from Spiceworks Ziff Davis in its new 2023 State of IT report. 51% of IT departments plan to increase their IT spending next year, even in the face of possible recession. IT departments mostly plan on spending their IT budgets upgrading outdated infrastructure at 51%. Managed services grew 11% compared with 8% in the prior year's survey results. According to the report's authors, a perceived shortage of IT talent may be the cause of increasing managed services spending. Most businesses, at 59%, expressed the belief that it's somewhat difficult or very difficult to hire skilled IT workers. Meanwhile, a good number of IT pros, at 34%, are planning to look for jobs in 2023. The report's authors suggested that IT pros are seeking better pay, but also they may be looking elsewhere because of return-to-office mandates. The report speculated that the return-to-office phenomenon had affected IT spending somewhat. For instance, spending on managed services was 15% before the pandemic, but respondents expected it would be 18% in 2023. Why do we care? If you are wondering, the average IT budget is roughly 2% of a mid-size enterprise. I'm assuming that is a ratio based on the average company revenue versus the average IT budget. That does seem low, although if I do the math and reduce that down on a $1 million business, the IT budget is $20,000. That seems awful low. Listeners, I'm looking to get some feedback here. That said, the takeaway is that even with the relative increases, we're not necessarily talking about massive swings of money, and we should be prudent over how the money is spent, because it's not endless. The priorities are useful: security and upgrades to infrastructure. And your core value in IT services continues to be helping out teams that find it hard to find their own staff. I want to highlight a Reddit post. Yes, a Reddit post. Titled, "Women, Why Are We Tolerating This?" The poster on /MSP begins with, quote, "Of the MSP conferences I've been to, 2/3 have included unwanted physical touching. I couldn't even begin to fathom counting all of the questionable remarks. What do we do? Tell them to stop? Sounds easy, but it's not. I wish I could tell the men that did this how awful it makes us feel. Powerless, defeated." I won't dig into the comments on the thread and leave that to you. You can likely guess many of the responses, as it's the entire spectrum. Why do we care? In this case, my first and most important statement to those who have been assaulted is that I see you. I see you. Everyone has or should have the right to feel safe. Consent is consent, and this isn't just an issue for women. It's easy to offer quick advice that individuals should speak up or go to the organizers or authorities. That's also a hot take that misses understanding humans. I include a link to an article shared with me from Psychology Today entitled "Understanding Flight, Fight, Freeze, and the Fawn Response," which dives into the fourth response that's lesser known, which is the response to try and please a person to avoid conflict. It's insightful. My simple thought: see others as humans, as people. Treat them well. It goes a very long way. Let's make sense of some conflicting perspectives. Want positivity? Let's turn to CompTIA, whose report says 8 in 10 U.S. small and medium-sized business respondents have expressed positive sentiments about the health of their business. 51% are holding steady and 30% are thriving. Want negativity? Verizon Business earlier this month said that nearly 9 in 10 respondents, at 89%, said they're worried about the state of the U.S. economy, and more than 4 in 5 said they're concerned about small businesses in the U.S. and the global economy. Ask CompTIA about technology's importance, and you learn that 62% of firms stated they believe tech is the primary factor and 31% a secondary factor in helping reach their strategic investments. But ask Verizon about what's being done, and only 29% of SMBs have transitioned to more digital or online operations in the past year, and 31% of SMB owners are cutting new tech investments. More than 8 in 10 respondents said collaboration between IT and other departments increased in the last 2 years, according to a report from ManageEngine. According to the report, more than 1/3 of decision makers said the likely department to collaborate with other departments all the time is IT, and more than 3/4 of decision makers said they think non-IT employees in their organization are now more knowledgeable about technology than they were before 2020. And the CIO job gets more complicated. 9 in 10 CIOs report that their roles and responsibilities have grown beyond technology to include areas traditionally associated with human resources and workforce management, sales and marketing, and sustainability and diversity, according to a survey by Lenovo. Why do we care? It's possible to be both positive and negative simultaneously. The CompTIA questions ask about individual businesses, and the Verizon questions ask about the economy's health overall. While linked, they are not the same. You can believe you can have a well-built ship as you sail into a rocky storm. And that's the lesson here. The key takeaway is not to be overconfident during the storm, taking risks you can't afford. Now extend that to customers and the advice you give them. The collaboration between IT and departments is increasing and the job is getting harder, so plan accordingly. I spotted this in Politico this week. The Central York School District of York City, Pennsylvania, banned a young adult fiction series that empowers girls of color to take up tech careers. The series is Girls Who Code, whose protagonists are Black, Latina, Asian, and Muslim. This is a year-old ban, but it resurfaced when CISA Director Jen Easterly mentioned it. She's made it a priority to increase the number of women in the cyber workforce. Quote, "This effort to ban their book is dangerous to the security of our nation on so many levels," said Easterly. Girls Who Code founder Rashima Sujani spoke with Insider and said, quote, "This is about controlling women, and it starts with controlling our girls and what info they have access to. We use these stories to teach kids to code," she said. "It felt very much like a direct attack on the movement we've been building to get girls coding, especially in districts that don't have the technology or have disparate Wi-Fi. Books are a great way to learn to code and a way to equalize access to coding." Sujani added that removing the books hinders visibility for women in technology fields and diversity in the industry, as many of the protagonists in the series are young girls of color. Quote, "You cannot be what you cannot see," she said. "They don't want girls to learn how to code because that's a way to be economically secure." Why do we care? In a market landscape where there aren't enough tech workers, removing tools to assist educators in teaching new entrants from diverse backgrounds is unwise, foolish, and self-defeating. And I think we as an industry should care a lot. 14 federal agencies have failed to address critical practices for protecting the sensitive personal data of Americans, a new Government Accountability Office report finds. Agencies that have not developed a complete privacy strategy include the Departments of Agriculture, Defense, Justice, Homeland Security, Housing and Urban Development, Veterans Affairs, State, Treasury, Environmental Protection Agency, and OPM. Why do we care? Wonder if we're going to get a privacy law? I do too, and I hope data like this requires it. It's the last day of Q3, so it's time for the Q3 diversity report from this podcast. Each quarter, we measure the leadership makeups of the teams delivering IT services. Monitoring 301 companies, this quarter's report tracks 3,449 humans, slightly up from last quarter. Identified on each organization's website, they are then classified as white and then non-white, as well as specifically black. Additionally, they're classified as male or female. For Q3 2022, 89.19% of those tracked are white, nearly identical to last quarter at 89.2%, which was up from the quarter before at 87.73%. The number is 79.12% male, almost identical to last quarter at 79.51% male and 79.75% the quarter before. Black leadership is relatively constant at 1.83%, the same as the September 2020 report 2 years ago. The Fortune 1000 has seen a slight uptick from 2.43% last quarter to 2.62% this quarter. I'm not alone in thinking about this. A survey by ThoughtWorks of 500 employees in the UK tech sector found that about 60% believe their companies could do more to create a more diverse and inclusive work environment. Recent research by the BCS found that women accounted for 17% of IT specialists in the UK, while about 8% of IT specialists are of Indian ethnicity, 2% are from a Black, African, Caribbean, or Black British background, and 2% from a Pakistani or Bangladeshi background. And according to data from the Kapoor Center, only 5% of the tech workforce, 3% of tech executives, and 1% of tech founders are Black professionals. As of 2021, only 19 Black CEOs have ever helmed a company on the Fortune 500, an annual list of the largest U.S. companies by revenue since the series started in 1955. Additionally, as of 2021, less than 10% of Apple, Google, Meta, and Microsoft's workforce is Black, according to the company's diversity reports. At these 4 companies and Amazon, the percentage of white employees decreased by 3.8% or more between 2019 and 2021, but the percentage of Black employees didn't increase by more than 1.8%. Research by NoOpSec analyzed 654 cybersecurity startups that raised more than $1 million in funding in 2020 and 2021. The goal? See how many are led by women. Of the 654 startups analyzed, only 22, or 3.3%, were led by female CEOs. Why do we care? 2 years ago, there were many promises made about progress. It's not really happening. That's why we care. I continue to believe that this is worth investing in. Here's your data that says there's an opportunity here. Research suggests that most companies want to do the right thing regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yet, as with everything in business, you have to measure your current state to see where you need to improve. Paradigm, which helps companies analyze their DEI efforts, released a tool called Blueprint last year that provides a way to have an honest, data-driven conversation about where your organization currently stands and where it needs to get better to align more closely with a company's stated goals and values. Paradigm is not alone in this space, which includes startups like Diversio and Included. There are also broader HR platform players, which tend to look at diversity through a hiring lens, such as Greenhouse Software, a company that's raised $110 million, according to Crunchbase. InkFile sent over their data on DEI. Here's what they found. 82% of small business owners are making DE&I a priority. 58.4% said diversity plays a critical role in their business, and they've already made it a key tenet of their organization. 64% reported that they have not invested any funds in DEI programs that would identify gaps in their policies and uncover opportunities for growth in the area. 40% don't feel their workforce is diverse enough to have a policy, and 24.3% are actively working toward increasing diversity within their business. Why do we care? There's data showing how the new generation of workers and customers value these investments. Want to hire better? Check out the episodes I've done on this, and there's one coming next week as well. Thanks for listening. Rather than a national day of, Today is the 3-year anniversary of the launch of this podcast. I want to thank you for your time and attention and your subscription. It is incredibly valuable. If you like the podcast, please share it with someone else. That helps grow the podcast and helps make this a continuing viable business. I really do appreciate all the support I've gotten from listeners and do enjoy hearing from you. Please don't hesitate to reach out, tell me what you like, and give me thoughts on what you want me to work on. Here's to another year. Thanks for your time and attention. Time is a finite resource, and I really value you giving me some of yours. If you like this video, you can let me know with a like of the video, and even more valuable, hitting the subscription button. My content is all free, and I use metrics like subscriptions to pay the bills, so it has real value. The content here is produced under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you're interested in more content like this, you can get access to content early via our Patreon at patreon.com/MSP Radio. It's our give what you want model where you set the value of what you think the content is worth. If you like this podcast, you can catch it daily as the 5-minute news and commentary show, The Business of Tech, available on all your favorite podcatchers with links at businessof.tech. Just hit that big blue button to subscribe. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen, and I really value the interaction. If you want to say something in the comments, I do respond and watch all that, and I look forward to talking to you next time.